Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the New York Cross Harbor here in Trainz. And as you can see by this lovely view of Brooklyn, I have been hard at work since our last video here. And boy, have I maybe gotten a little carried away with the detailing and the background scenes and that sort of thing. I love it. I think it's going to be awesome. It looks great. But today what we're going to do is we're going to do some of that detailing that you see here on the screen. And I'm going to take you through some of the scenes that I've been working on and show you just how detailed this overall build is coming along. And as I said, maybe I got a little carried away, but anyway, let's get into the video. So before we get into any detail work here, I needed to address something that I've been trying to avoid for the entire duration of this build so far, and that is actually doing work on the car float, the car barge, and the apron. It was just something that I've been avoiding for a while because I knew it was going to be a pain in the butt to do, and I wanted to do a little bit of it on camera just to show you guys what I had to do. And essentially it just boiled down to dealing with a lot of track that essentially had to be floating over top of the barge, and then the apron is on a slope, so trying to get the grade to match properly, and then you've got turnouts involved, and boy, it's just it's kind of a headache to get done here. So what I did here was I made the typical 3-track car barge, which the New York Cross Harbor used back in the 80s and 90s, and I wanted to replicate that here, as well as I did on my end scale layout. So it's pretty much the same track arrangement here, with the turnout being kind of half on the apron and half on the barge, which is not something that's particularly easy to pull off, especially when everything is on a gradient here, which you'll see. I fight with it for a little bit. I'm not going to trouble you guys for too long in this process, but that's basically the gist of it there. You can see I'm having a lot of trouble with the spline points matching up and then getting the grade proper so that track is not floating or at different levels and blah blah blah. It's just, it was just a real fight. It took me probably an hour or so to get this to the point that I wanted it to be. And you can see here I've got the 3 tracks on the barge now, and I'm just putting some cars down just to make sure that I can hold the amount of cars that the prototype held, which was around 12 cars, depending on the car length. And now I can get it all connected up here. I need to do maybe a little bit more detailing around the apron, but I'll come back to that probably off camera at another time. One thing that I want to mention here, though, is that the apron that was used here on the prototype was not this style, and I've mentioned this in the past. This is the style with the gantry over top of the apron that adjusted the height based on the tides, and I don't know how exactly they worked, but that's the gist of that. The actual prototype used just a floating apron, so it was literally just like a 2-track girder bridge with a pontoon under it, and it just rose up and down with the tides. I could not find a suitable 2-track girder bridge to do that with, so I'm using this apron setup here. If I come across something that's a little bit more prototypical, I will swap it out, but for now that is what I'm going to deal with. And again, it doesn't exactly match the prototype, but a lot of the car float operations that did exist in the New York Harbor area did utilize that style of apron. So it's not totally out of place, it just wasn't really used here. So now we're going to move on to adding some ground cover and a little bit of terraforming, and mostly some ground texture. And again, I'm using a lot of the S. Myers textures, and we're using HC terrain here, so we're at a limit we've got the 8 texture limit. And I encountered that initially just a moment ago, but I was pretty particular with the textures that I picked out early on, so I haven't really ran into any real issues with it. It hasn't been a problem. I'm using dirty, rubbish-looking textures anyway. Just mix and match, and it'll look fine. You can see there just a second ago, I keep removing a texture. It was one of the sand textures or dirt textures that I used. Not a big deal. I just swapped it out for a different one. It's really just a matter of being aware that you're already at the texture limit and maybe not going past that. Really what I should have done is maybe created like a pick list of textures, but I don't know. It wasn't really, it was a non-issue. That's really what I'm trying to say. So I'm just spreading out some typical plants and shrubs and grasses around here. On the actual prototype here at 50th Street on the Cross Harbor, there actually was 2 aprons and float operations here. I believe Bush, I always get it mixed up. Bush 1 was the north apron and Bush 2 was the south apron, I think. And Bush 1 sank and they were using Bush 2, which I kind of mixed these up a little bit. I might even be mixing it up right now, but suffice it to say, one of them had sunk in the 80s, so they were only really using one anyway. So that's also why there's a large open area next to the tracks there, because there would have been a second pair of tracks leading to another apron and car float operation there. So for a little bit, I kind of struggled with what exactly to do behind these 2 large structures here. If you look at Google Earth, it's sort of grown in a little bit depending on what area you're looking at. Obviously right now this is all a park. They converted this all to a park, so it looks totally different today than it ever has. So trying to get it to look what it looked like in the 80s and 90s is a little bit of a challenge, but I know that a lot of the buildings and structures back here were not used. They had been abandoned for many years because they were originally Bush terminal structures, which were from like the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So you're talking about steam era buildings that have since collapsed and have been in disuse for a long period of time. So I thought it would make sense to just add some more beat up textures back here, lots of broken asphalt and concrete textures, and then adding in some grass. And one thing that I started doing recently, which I only just started doing this, is actually changing the size, the scale of some of these textures. And obviously, you know, a lot of people are probably like, oh yeah, of course you could do that. But I usually try to keep the scale the same throughout the build process, because some textures, when you blow the scale up to 100%, it just looks ridiculous. But some of these concrete textures, if you up the scale to about 100% or so, they actually look better. They look more broken apart, and it just, I don't know, it just has a totally different look to it. So I've been doing a little mixing and matching in different areas with larger scale textures and lower scale textures, and you just get this really good effect when you blend them together and mix them, and especially if you can transition them together with grasses and shrubs and just sort of blend it all together. Like, it looks really great. So another characteristic of this Bush terminal area here is just a high amount of like parked trailers and trucks. I don't know why they store them back there. I don't know if they're stored or if they're defunct or derelict or abandoned or what, but if you look at Google or if you go visit this place in real life, this whole area is just completely covered with disused trailers. So I had to add in a lot of that, and it also just helps kind of fill up the space. So at this point now we're getting into the fun stuff. At least this is the fun stuff for me. At this point in the build, we can start doing some of the super detailing things, and this is what I've been looking forward to the most. Because this area of Brooklyn, and just New York City as a whole, if you've ever been to New York, you know how busy it is everywhere. So this is a waterfront, you know, industrial park in Brooklyn. It's very busy here, so I want to be able to capture that. And so I thought it'd be a great idea to start working in some of these loading dock details, putting pallets of goods all over the place, pallet jacks, pallets, debris, all sorts of things, just to really bring it, or help bring it to life. The only thing that I haven't added so far, and I am not sure I'm going to add, and this is a typical me thing, is people. And the only reason that I'm always hesitant to add people is because they're always so high poly. and I don't want to spend all of my, you know, screen rendering on people. So that's just sort of what it boils down to. They may be the last thing that I add if I see that the game, if I see that this route is not necessarily like already lagging really badly, then I'll start to introduce some actual people. But otherwise, I'm adding in all of this debris and that sort of thing. And I should have pointed it out when it was happening on the screen a moment ago. But what I was doing using Surveyor 2 is that I was placing all of the pallets and the objects that were going to go on the loading dock on the ground, so they were all on the same level together. And I lined them up together and then selected them all by holding Shift and moved them as a group onto the loading dock. So they were actually all at the same height and they all stayed together. You'll see me do that throughout this process, but I wanted to mention it before I forgot, or, you know, whatever, before I moved on too far. So like I was just mentioning here, I'm taking these palletized assets, I'm putting them on the ground first, and I'm getting them into the position that I want them to be in so the pallet jacks can get in there. I'm using multi-select, using Surveyor 2, and then I can just move them together as a group right onto the loading dock, and then I just copied them and I moved them down to the other side there and rearranged them a little bit, and it's so easy. Surveyor 2 makes detailing so easy. And in fact, I took a lot of this stuff and copied it and just moved it to different places, rearranged some things. I think that that's probably the only reason I've been able to accomplish the amount of detail that I'm adding into this build, really, is the fact that I can kind of do the work in bulk and then copy it and move it someplace else and rearrange it. Like, I really made use of that with the background buildings, all of the side streets. I did all of the brownstones and all of the you know, storefronts and everything on all the city blocks around here. And instead of having to redo them a whole bunch of times, I copied them and moved them to a different street and then rearranged the buildings. Because I'm not gonna, there's only so many buildings in the game. There's only so many of these assets you can use. You're going to reuse those assets no matter what you do. So why not just make it a little bit easier, get a whole group together and move them and then just rearrange them. So off to the north side of these two buildings here is, I guess, what probably used to be an alleyway next to where the old foundation is from these other buildings here. So this is, you know, I've been kind of scratching my head about how to fill this in and really make it look busy and detailed without overdoing it at the same time. And, you know, I'm just bringing in different elements, different things that might have been stored there, scrap, anything that might look like it makes sense, and just sort of stretching it in between these former alleyways here. So I should mention here, right on that track in the foreground there, the Cross Harbor did have a very short-lived intermodal operation. So I believe, based on my research, they used that track there to lift the containers off of the flat cars. So they didn't do double stack or anything like that. It was all single stack, and I think some trailer on flat car operations, and that is the track that they would do that on. It was sort of isolated by itself, and I guess probably easy for those picker crane, you know, container crane things to get in there and move them around. So we got this large parking lot here that was looking a little too clean for my liking. So I started using some of these street damage decals, let's call them decals, and just putting them in a few areas to represent some cracks or some oil spills. I would really like to see more of these that maybe were like skid marks on the road, tire tracks, or oil spills, oil slicks. I know that there's some oil decals that you could put down, but like a big sheet like this is really nice to be able to use. And again, just sort of using the copy function, I can place a couple of them down, get them lined up with the grid, and just copy them and move them around much more easily than having to do them one at a time. And to add a little bit more texture to the new asphalt here, I'm using some of the S. Myers city dirt textures, and I've turned the sensitivity down to 2%, so it's just like a really light coating of this pebbly, abrased, I guess you could call it abrasive road texture over top of the pavement texture. So it kind of makes it a little bit easier, so I don't have to place down so many of those decals to actually just use a texture over top. And again, if you turn the sensitivity down to like 2%, it's sort of like turning down the opacity. So I could dial that down and just sort of get like a nice layer over top, and it looks really good. Okay, so finally we're moving across the street. I had a few businesses here adjacent to the yard that needed to be populated a bit, so we're gonna spend a few minutes detailing those pretty much the same way that I was doing the previous loading dock. And since this is Brooklyn, you know that space is at a premium. And for whatever reason, these people down here really know how to pack as much as possible into the space that they have available. They will shoehorn trailers and all sorts of stuff into corners and spaces that you didn't even know were possible. So some of this stuff might look a little outlandish, a little bit crazy. Like, why would they put a trailer there? Why would they put a box truck there? But believe me, dudes, like they find a way. If they need space for something, they're gonna make it fit. So I'm trying to capture that in this build, and man, it is very, very difficult. I'm not this is no exaggeration. Look at Google, look at this area on Google, and try to just do one block and match the amount of just the freneticness that is going on in this area. It's insane. It's crazy when you start to dive down into it. And all I can do, really, the best I can do, is sort of get just the gist of it. You know what I mean? If I spent my whole time trying to model every single square foot, you know, and how jam-packed it is, I would never be able to get it done. It would also never run on anybody's computer but my own, maybe, but you know, it wouldn't be a good use of time is what I'm trying to say. But, you know, what I can do is try to get as close as possible and make it as busy as possible within the limits of the game and within the limits of the time that I have to sit here and detail this stuff. So that's all I'm trying to say. But I'm doing, you know, the best I can to try to capture it. You'll see in a few other spots, I start putting some trucks that are double parked and they're loading and unloading, and it just really captures the feel of the area very, very well. I actually kind of feel like some of these areas, maybe even in this lot here, could probably use a little bit more. But it's one of those things where, like, I need to do a bit of detail work and then step away for a little bit, and then I can come back and add some more details, and then I'll step away, and then I'll come back and get some ideas for some more details. You can't really do it all in one sitting. It's just too much. All right, now on to another street here. This is where I was mentioning before that I did a couple little scenes with some trucks loading and unloading here. I'm going to try to populate these roads using these splines here. I think they're like UZ... I can't read what the thing says on my playback screen here, but it's like UZ car spline or something like that. They seem to be very low poly, so I'm probably going to populate my streets using those. Again, I have to kind of be aware of how many cars I'm putting down because they are generally pretty high poly, but I think these will be a pretty good fit, and especially if I mix in some regular 3D cars, I think they'll blend in pretty well. But here, this little scene, the building that was on the right just a second ago, yeah, this place on the right looks like it's like a little storefront, some kind of bakery maybe, or it says True Value, I don't know. So I wanted to just add a little scene here where, you know, they don't have loading docks. You know, a lot of these places don't have loading docks. So where do they get their shipments? They get them right on the street. And, you know, a truck will pull up and just double park right out front, drop their lift gate, and just dump a couple pallets, you know, right up front, right up on the sidewalk. And, you know, it's up for the owner to either break them down on the sidewalk or bring them in and break them down or whatever they decide to do. And this is just characteristic of New York City overall. Like anywhere in the city you go, you're going to see this because there's no parking anywhere. There's no loading docks. A lot of stuff just takes place right on the sidewalk and right on the street. And I really wanted to capture that feel here. And I'm going to be adding a lot of scenes like that throughout the area immediately adjacent to any part of the tracks. I'm not going to go too far away in doing scenes like this, like way far away from where anybody's going to see them. But immediately trackside, you're going to see a lot of scenes like this where things are being loaded into trucks, unloaded. You're going to have forklifts on the sidewalk with lumber and palleted goods and that sort of thing. And that is just the whole feel of the city, to me at least. All right, so now this was sort of a last minute scene that I wanted to add here. If you've ever lived in New York City, you're going to like really appreciate this. If you've ever lived in the city or if you've ever been in the city, you've probably seen Con Ed come in to a street and close it and just dig a big trench down the middle of the road and, you know, I don't know, lay a pipe or whatever. And then they just leave, they patch it up maybe. Or they'll just leave it exposed or leave it covered with those plates. So I wanted to recreate a scene like that here because it's just anywhere you look in the city, Con Ed they literally will just come into a neighborhood and dig a trench down the road and replace a pipe, and then they just either don't finish the job or they're like, yeah, we'll finish it in like 5 years or something like that. They are just the worst. What's even worse is when they just pave over it with like a little strip of asphalt that just doesn't match anything else. It's just, oh, it's so bad. There was one time when I was living in Brooklyn, and I'll mention this, the road that I lived on was a mess. It was full of potholes. It was just a disaster. And the city finally came in and repaved the whole street. And it was great. 2 weeks later, Con Ed came in, did exactly this. They dug a whole trench and they never like repave the road or anything like that, and it was right back to where it was within 2 weeks. I'm like, do these people not communicate with each other? It was so stupid. I was so mad. Oh, it was ridiculous. Anyway, so I wanted to recreate that scene here, so I got some construction equipment, some road cones, and dug a big trench using the HD terrain to do so. I think the trench was like 1 meter wide and 2 meters deep or something like that. So very good use of HD terrain, if I do say so myself. And making use of these TBS traffic barrier things here. This is, I mean, from my memory, this is exactly what it would be like. They would just put some barriers up on the side and be like, yeah, don't fall in the hole. If you fall in the hole, it's your fault. You know, so, yeah, pay attention. So I think this is probably one of my favorite scenes here, and it's right adjacent to the tracks. So super cool. Will be very nice to look at when you're driving by. I hope you guys enjoy it. right, so we're coming into the cinematics here. This is the last build clip finishing up here. So I just want to mention that this project is getting pretty close to being done. You can see here that I have I've modeled a very large area of Brooklyn here, but it's really not that big, honestly. It's only maybe 2 miles across or something like that. This is really just a module, and that's all it's meant to be. But yeah, I kind of maybe got a little carried away with all of the buildings that I modeled here. I actually tried to keep it as true to life as possible and was looking at Google the entire time, so I put the right building in the right location like a psychopath. But anyway, I think the results speak for themselves, and this project is, I don't want to say it's winding down, but we're getting pretty close. I need to tie up some loose ends, figure out how I'm going to close out the backgrounds and some of the side scenes, I suppose, and then I got to continue to do some more detailing. So I might be able to squeeze out maybe 1 or 2 more videos out of this project here, and I hope you guys have been enjoying it. It's kind of a little mini series, a little project here that's been going on for about 6 months. So I've been enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. If you did, leave me a comment down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you're not already. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.